The Warsangali Sultanate was a Somali imperial ruling house centered in northeastern and in some parts of southeastern Somalia. It was one of the largest sultanates ever established in the territory and, at the height of its power, included the Sanaag region and parts of the northeastern Bari region of the country, an area historically known as Maakhir of the Maakhir Coast. The Sultanate was founded in the late 13th century in northern Somalia by a group of Somalis from the Warsangali branch of the Darod clan, and was ruled by the descendants of the Garaad. In the late 19th century, the influential Sultan Mohamoud Ali Shire governed the Sultanate, assuming control during some of its most turbulent years. The Akil-Daha ruled south of Sanaag and some portions of the Bari region. In 1884, the United Kingdom established the Protectorate of British Somaliland through various treaties with the northern Somali sultanates, including the Warsangali Sultanate. History: Akil-Daha. Although there is a dearth of historical testimony on Akil-Daha, according to oral tradition, he fought against the Abyssinians. In honor of his accomplishments, Akil-Daha's name is immortalized in the valley and mountains of the city known as Daha. Louis, in his book A Pastoral Democracy, a study of pastoralism and politics among the northern Somali of the Horn of Africa, refers to the Sultan from the colonial literature as a man of unusual influence, a man of mercurial image, and a man of unusual strength. Several Somali sultanates existed in Somalia prior to the European imperialism of the 19th century, but the Warsangali Sultanate was the only one with a robust tax-based centralized administration. Louis writes, vestiges of a similar degree of centralized administration on the pattern of a Muslim sultanate survive today in the Protectorate among the Warsangali. Prior to 1920, the Garaad had at his command a small standing army with which, with British support, he fought Syed Muhammad Abdul Hassan's forces. But Garaad's powers are dwindling under modern administration. Sultanates such as these generally only arose on the coast or through commanding an important trade route, and were largely dependent on the possession and control of a port or other exploitable economic resources. They were in direct trade and diffuse political relations with Arabia, received occasional Arab immigrants, and were the centers from which Islam expanded with trade into the interior. The sultanates had to fight to maintain the positions of supremacy against the periodic incursions of raiding parties of nomads, and their authority was never great. Northern Somali Sultanates. In 1896, a challenge of leadership emerged between a father and son. The powerful Garaad Ali Shire's authority was dwindling, and young Mohamoud Ali Shire, with the tacit support of the Isse Garaad subclan of the Warsangali Darod, sought to undermine the power of his father. Before then, internal conflict among the Warsangali subclans had surfaced and had had an effect on Sultan Mohamoud Ali Shire and his ascension to power. The disarray caused by the young Mohammad among the Warsangali was finally settled by the proposal that Mohammad Fils should become Sultan, while his father could remain Garaad. The Bithador subclan of the Warsangali, however, withdrew the support for the Sultan, deeming him an upstart and an untested authority figure. They subsequently forged an alliance with the Somali religious and nationalist leader Muhammad Abdul Hassan's dervish forces in an attempt to defeat Britain and Ethiopia, two powers that were then also vying for control of the Somali peninsula. In his paper The Madmullah, a Northern Somalia, the historian Robert L. Hess touches upon this alliance, writing that, in attempt to break out of Obion Majetin circle, The mullah sought closer alliances with the Bitador Warsangali of British Somaliland and Bargeri of Ethiopia. Following an unexpected onslaught, the Sultan ordered his army to retreat from its main military posts in Erigavo, a town that at the time served as a reserve well for the Sultan's horses and as a base for his army. Hassan's alliance with the Bitador clan was instrumental in extending the dervish sphere of influence and in expanding his dervish state's hegemony. On the 3rd of March 1905, Italy came close to signing a treaty with Hassan Attilik, offering him the Nagal territory as a protectorate. Hassan, however, rejected the offer and his dervish army continued its anti-imperial resistance struggle. In its early proposal, both the Maakhir and Warsangali Sultanates also opposed the treaty, as they foresaw potential threats to their own local authority from its hypothetical implementation. These sultanates thus collaborated to defeat the dervish forces. The first success in this Anglo-Italian cooperation came in December 1910. In that month, the British Warsangali and the Italian Middayexpress peacefully resolved all their outstanding disputes and, convening in Bandar-Qasim, agreed to act jointly in combating Sayyid Muhammad Abdullah Hassan and his dervishes. The Middayexpress-Warsangali Accord led to a common offensive against the Mullah, whose forces were cut off from arms and munitions smuggled in from the coast. In 1920, the dervishes unexpectedly captured Badan and besieged Lascori. The British governor at Aden soon sent RAF biplanes to contain the advance of the dervish army into the Warsangali country. Though the airstrikes that bombarded Badan, Jadali and Talax never did considerable harm to the dervishes, the dervishes were still powerful but disorganized and dispersed into unknown areas. Finally, the forces of Warsangali and dervishes met at Jadali, and this was in fact the final decimation of the dervish movement. The Middayexpress Somalis, who in June succeeded launching counter-attack with the aid of the Warsangali allies. Mullah and his followers were driven out of Italian Somaliland into British Somaliland, where they occupied Buhotle with great cruelty and oppressed the Dol Bafanta, who had shifted their allegiance back to British Somaliland. As a result, the dervishes abandoned the Nagal territory and retreated into the Horde. Somali-British treaties. Historically, the British used indirect rule to their advantage to control and exploit territories. Following the British treaty with the Warsangali in 1886, the British Somaliland Protectorate was formed. Much of the territory's economy at the time was centered on the trade relationship it had with Aden, Yemen, which was chiefly based on the export of livestock, frankincense, and myrrh in return for food, fabric, and other materials. The Protectorate was subsequently administered from Aden until 1898, just before the rise to prominence of Sayyid Muhammad Abdullah Hassan. The British realized that isolated efforts to pacify Somali authority with treaties were not sufficient, and that doing so could incite trouble within the Protectorate. In 1884, the British government thus signed protection treaties with the Isa, Gadabasi and Isaac Somali clans, all at once. This particular tripartite agreement was beneficial to the British, as it permitted them to operate harmoniously alongside the existing clan social systems of northwestern Somalia. However, Sultan Mohamoud Ali Shire and his administration in the northeastern part of the Somali territories wielded enough power to continue to exercise independent operation and rule. Article 5 of the British Treaty with the Warsangali acknowledges this continued sovereignty of the Warsangali territories, adding that the British government appointed an ambassador to the region and was in the process of building an office there. Article 5. The British government shall have the power to appoint an agent or agents to reside in the territories of the Warsangali, and every such agent shall be treated with respect and consideration, and be entitled to have for this protection such guard as the British government deems sufficient. Another article of the treaty between the Warsangali and the British highlights the independence of the Warsangali from colonial interference, vis-à-vis the territories. Article 3. The Warsangali are bound to render assistance to any vessel, whether British or belonging to any other nation, that may be wrecked on the shores under their jurisdiction and control, and to protect the crew, passengers, and cargo of such vessels, giving speedy intimation to the resident at Aden of the circumstances, for which act of friendship and goodwill a suitable reward will be given by the British government. Civilization, society and Islam. Islam was introduced into the Sanaag region as early as the 7th century, with most of the area's inhabitants following the Shafi'i madhab of Sunni Islam. Thus, it appears that Sufism and saint veneration, the mystical movement and ecstasy in Islam, was embraced among the Warsangali clans of Sanaag and spread to other areas of Somalia. For instance, Palan, a small town located 20 kilometers south of Badon, houses the sepulchre of Darod Ismail, the founder of the Darod clan. The Somali scholar Said Ali Nur indicates that regions such as Sila, Sanaag and Hara became centers of dispersal for the founders of many Muslim communities in the Horn. In fact, the founder of the Darod clan is venerated as a saint by many members of said clan. This sort of veneration is internalized in the customs of all Somalis, and these figures are known as ancestor saints. They are means by which man's appeal to the mercy and blessings of God through the saints is strengthened. These saints, however, are not worshipped, but venerated, and the respect shown to them is clearly based upon their intermediary role. The structure of the Lro Mosque, where, among other masjids, actual worship took place, is still of remarkable strength, almost marble, initially due to the many ancient settlements. The northeastern cities of Las Corey and Lro formed a growing international hub and served as important destinations. The Sultan's revolt against the British, however, led to the ultimate decline of these coastal areas, as the British then shifted their administration to the western side of northern Somalia. The erstwhile commercial centers of Las Corey and Lro consequently diminish in importance. However, the ascendancy of Somali society in terms of trade, civilization and contact with ancient pharaohs continued for many centuries. In northern Somalia, which is believed to have been the location of the famous land of Punt, existed numerous notable examples of sophisticated architecture, agricultural innovation and civil engineering. Irrefutable evidence is the existence of 15-story towers in Las Corey that were built during the Garaad dynasty. Materials used in the local Somali architecture included, among other things, a specific type of wood. The gum-producing trees grow on the sterile hills near the coast in the Sanaag and Bari regions. In this district there also grows a tree known in Somali as damask, a species of willow valuable for house and boat building purposes. It grows along the banks of the Tugsa dry watercourses that in the rainy season drain the interior. Moreover, according to historical testimony by the British Lieutenant John Hanning speak in his journal What Led to the Discovery of the Source of the Nile, published some 31 years before the Somali-British Treaty of 1886, wherein the English agreed to provide military and logistical support to the Isaac, near Aden and Yemen. The decline in power of the Warsangali Sultanate began thus. Speak also discussed the relative strength of the Sultanate's administration, opining that Garaad Mohamoud Ali was a capable leader. Warsangali Dervish collaboration. The two Somali leaders, Sultan Mohamoud Ali Shire and Syed Muhammad Abdullah Hassan, were in the spotlight. The British Somaliland Protectorate administration had dealt with each one of them secretly, and had worked to prevent a possible bilateral alliance of power sharing and common economic and political integration on the part. A notable incident took place in 1908 when British airplanes bombarded Jadali, Badun and Talix. This led to the dispersal of the dervish into many areas, and it took a long period for the Saeed to recoup his strength. However, despite the rift between them, Sultan Mohamoud Ali Shire and his army within the British Somaliland Protectorate's claimed areas of Sanaag were severely disturbed by the sudden ebb in dervish activities. To demonstrate his concern, Sultan Shire ordered his army to open fire on a British ship that was about to land at the port of Lascori. I.M. Lewis cites this brief incident in his book, A Modern History of the Somali. The Warsangali clan within the British Protectorate on the eastern coast, who under the spirited leader Garaad Mohamoud Ali Shire had now decided to throw in the lot with the dervishes, and in January 1908, fired on a British dhow as it was landing on the coast. This incident has led to a hostile exchange of letters with the consul at Berbera, and it was evident that the dervishes would soon be on the march again. Furthermore, Hassan's association with Mohamoud Ali Shire as brother-in-law gave him access to the Maakhir Coast, which served as a gateway to the Arabian Peninsula for the importation of firearms and ammunition. The dervishes thus resumed the movements which rendered the British nervous, especially since their alliance with the Isaac forged in a treaty from 1885 had proved ineffectual. The British ran out of options and were forced to collaborate with the Italians and the Majeerteen Sultanates for an attack that forced the dervishes from the main strongholds such as Talix and Jadali. Sporadic resistance using guerrilla tactics ensued. However, while Sultan Mohamoud Ali Shire's government was feared by the British and many Somali clans, some Warsangali subclans also viewed the Sultan's government with suspicion because of its authoritarianism. They consequently declared independence from his dominions and began a rebellion to topple the leader. This internal conflict among the Warsangali subclans coincided with the dervishes' struggle to expel the British and Italian imperialists. In an attempt to lure supporters to side with him, the Saeed composed a poem for this incident. The Sultan's troops killed many men of the Bithidor clan, a subclan of the Warsangali, according to testimony by John Hanning Speak in his journal, and elders of the Warsangali subclans. This led to defiance and hostility on the part of the Bithidor. Members of the Bithidor nonetheless settled in Zingalol, which was then the most populous city in Sanaag, as well as in the long plateau of Zadid in large numbers. Exile. Despite a lack of stability and struggles with the imperialists, Sultan Shire was secretly invited to a conference in Yemen, ostensibly to discuss possible ways of settling differences. After a short session before the meeting was scheduled to begin, he was taken into custody by the British authorities. Sultan Shire was later tried without proper representation in a kangaroo court, due to the Sultan's vehement and active opposition to foreign rule over his territory and dread on the part of the British of the prospect of another 20 years of costly and protracted battles with yet another Somali potentate. He was sentenced to exile in the Seychelles for a period of 7 years. However, Shire continued to play a prominent role in local affairs until his eventual death a few months after independence. as the British administration sought his support before introducing any major policy changes so as to avoid alienating the influential leader. Timeline of events in northern Somalia. 1884 – Khedives evacuate Somali coast. British garrison to Berbera from Bombay. 1885 – British treaties with the Isa, Isaac and Darod clans. 1886 – British treaty with the Warsangali. 1895 – Muhammad Abdullah Hassan's Saleh religious revival in Berbera fails. 1898 – The British Foreign Office takes over administration of the British Somaliland Protectorate from the India Office. The Protectorate was then the only self-supporting British dependency in Eastern Africa. 1899 – First truculent letter from Hassan at Garaad to Protectorate administration. 1900 – Abyssinians fights Hassan at Haradijit. Hassan takes 2,000 Ede camels. 1900 November – Sweyn's first expedition with engagements at Kirit, Samala, Welad, Anahadagli, Garaad, Ferdinand. 1901 October – Sweyn's second expedition with engagements at Erigo. 1903 April – Third expedition with engagements at Darod. 1904 January – Fourth expedition with engagements at Jidbali. 1904 March – Jidbali occupies Higlajib and Laskori. 1904 – 21 March – Ilig. 1904 October – Pestalozza peace. 1909 November – Sultan's forces repel British to coast. 1913 – 9 August Battle of Dulmad Arbor. Hassan's forces defeat Somaliland Camel Constabulary. Colonel Richard Caulfield also killed. 1913 – 5 September Hassan raids Barrow. 1914 – 12 March Hassan raids Berbera. Somaliland Camel Corps established. 1914 November Shimbir Beris. 1916 Meh dervishes shelled from sea while besieging Laskori. 1919 November 5th expedition with engagements at Badon, Laskori, Malish, Jadali, Talix. 1920 January British employ aerial bombardment for the first time on the continent in order to defeat of Hassan at Malish, Jadali, Badon, Talix. 3000 Hy. Warsangali and Dulbafante attack Hassan at Gora near Shinilar. The Year of Aeroplanes. 1920 November Hassan dies of influenza. Sultan Mohamoud Ali Shire exiled to Seychelles for 7 years for ignoring British treaties. Rulers of the Warsangali Sultanate. Rulers of the Warsangali Sultanate up to and after Sultan Mohamoud Ali Shire.